Dr. Phil was holding an envelope. His hand was steady, but his eyes weren't. The cameras were rolling, the audience was silent, and the woman sitting across from him had just said something that made the entire studio forget to breathe. He raised his other hand, palm out, firm, final. "Stop," he said. Not loudly, not angrily, just stop. The production crew froze. The teleprompter went dark. And in that moment, everyone knew this wasn't part of the plan. What happens when a betrayal so deep is spoken out loud that even Dr. Phil, a man who's heard thousands of stories, has to pause the show? What happens when the truth is so raw that protocol doesn't matter anymore? You're about to find out, because what this woman revealed didn't just shock the audience, it changed the entire direction of the episode. And it all started with that envelope. Her name was Emily. She was 34 years old, a mother of two, and from the outside, her life looked ordinary. She had a husband, a small home in the suburbs, a job as a school librarian. But beneath that surface was a fracture so deep that it had been quietly breaking her for years. And today, on national television, she was finally ready to speak it into existence. Emily had written to the Dr. Phil show 3 months earlier. Her letter was short, almost apologetic. She said she didn't know if her story was big enough to be told, but the producers saw something in her words, something haunting. It wasn't drama for drama's sake. It was pain that had nowhere else to go. So they invited her, and she came. The episode was titled, "When Trust is Shattered." The setup was simple. Emily would sit down with Dr. Phil, tell her story, and he would offer guidance. Standard format, clean arc. But from the moment Emily walked onto that stage, something felt different. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her hands were trembling, and when she sat down in that burgundy chair, she didn't look at the audience. She looked at Dr. Phil like he was the only person in the room. "Emily," Dr. Phil began, leaning forward slightly, "thank you for being here. I know this isn't easy." She nodded. Her voice was quiet when she spoke. "I didn't think I'd actually come," she said, "but I need to say this out loud. I need someone to hear me." Dr. Phil nodded. "I'm listening." And so she began. Emily told him about her husband, Mark. They'd been married for 12 years. High school sweethearts, the kind of love story people write songs about. He was her best friend, her partner, the father of her children. And for a long time, she believed that was enough. She believed they were enough. But 3 years ago, something changed. Mark started working late. He became distant. He stopped looking at her the way he used to. Emily didn't want to be the suspicious wife, so she didn't ask questions. She trusted him. She had always trusted him. Then one night, she found the messages. The audience shifted in their seats. Dr. Phil's expression didn't change, but his posture did. He leaned in just a fraction more. "What did the messages say?" he asked. Emily's voice cracked. "They said everything." The woman Mark had been texting wasn't a stranger. She was Emily's sister. The studio went completely silent. Not the kind of silence that happens when someone pauses for effect, the kind that happens when the air itself seems to stop moving. Dr. Phil closed his eyes for a moment, exhaled slowly, and when he opened them again, there was something in his gaze that hadn't been there before. Not pity, something deeper. Recognition. "Your sister," he repeated. Not a question, a confirmation. Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face now. "My sister, the person I trusted most in the world after him." They'd been together for 2 years. 2 years, Dr. Phil, and I had no idea. The betrayal wasn't just romantic. It was familial. It was systemic. It was the kind of wound that doesn't heal because it cuts through every layer of who you are, your marriage, your family, your sense of reality itself. Dr. Phil sat back in his chair. For a moment, he didn't say anything. The cameras stayed on him, waiting. The audience was waiting. Emily was waiting. And then he did something no one expected. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope, a plain white envelope. He held it in both hands, looking at it, then at Emily. "Emily," he said quietly, "before we go any further, I need to tell you something." The producer in the booth leaned forward, confused. This wasn't in the script. Dr. Phil glanced up at the cameras, then at the crew. "Stop the tape," he said. His voice was calm, but it was an order. The red lights on the cameras blinked off. The audience murmured in confusion. Emily's eyes widened. "What's happening?" she asked. Dr. Phil stood up. He walked over to her chair, knelt down so he was at her eye level, and handed her the envelope. "This," he said, "is from your children." Emily's hand shook as she took it. She stared at the envelope like it might explode. "My kids?" she whispered. Dr. Phil nodded. "Your son and your daughter. They wrote you a letter. They wanted you to know something before you made any decisions about what comes next." Emily looked at him, then at the envelope, then back at him. Her lips trembled. "I don't know if I can read this right now." "You don't have to," Dr. Phil said gently. "But when you're ready, I want you to know that they see you. They see how much you're hurting, and they want you to know they're with you no matter what." The audience was crying now, not just a few people, entire rows, because this wasn't about drama anymore. It was about a mother who was shattered and two children who were trying to hold her together with words on a page. Subscribe and leave a comment because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Emily didn't open the envelope right away. She held it against her chest, closed her eyes, and let herself cry. Not the silent, apologetic kind she'd been doing before, the kind that comes from somewhere deep and unguarded. Dr. Phil stayed kneeling beside her, one hand on the arm of her chair, giving her space to feel it all. When she finally looked up, her voice was raw. "I don't know how to move forward from this." Dr. Phil nodded. "I know, and that's why we're here." He stood, walked back to his chair, and gestured to the crew. "Bring him in." The audience gasped. Emily's head snapped up. "What? Who?" The side door to the studio opened, and Mark walked in. He looked exactly like Emily had described him. Tall, clean-cut, the kind of man who could blend into any room and be forgotten. But today, he wasn't forgettable. Today, he was the man who had destroyed his family, and everyone in that room knew it. Mark stopped a few feet from the stage. He didn't sit down. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, looking at Emily like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Dr. Phil didn't give him time to search. "Mark," he said, his voice sharp now, "do you understand what you've done to this woman?" Mark's jaw tightened. "I know I messed up." "Messed up," Dr. Phil repeated, his tone cutting. "You didn't mess up. You didn't forget to take out the trash or miss an anniversary. You had an affair with your wife's sister for 2 years. That's not a mistake. That's a choice, a series of choices, and every single one of them was a betrayal." Mark shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't mean for it to happen." "Then why did it?" Dr. Phil shot back. "Because you were lonely? Because you were bored? Because you didn't think you'd get caught?" He leaned forward, eyes locked on Mark. "Or because you didn't care?" The silence that followed was brutal. Mark opened his mouth, closed it, then finally said, "I don't know." Dr. Phil's expression hardened. "That's not good enough." Emily was staring at Mark now, and for the first time since she'd walked onto that stage, she looked angry. Not sad, not broken, angry. "You don't know?" she repeated, her voice rising. "You don't know why you destroyed our family? Why you lied to me every single day for 2 years? Why you looked me in the eye and told me you loved me while you were sleeping with my sister?" Mark flinched. "Emily, I don't," she said, cutting him off.
Don't say my name like that, like you still have the right to." Dr. Phil paused mid-sentence. The studio went completely silent. He looked at Emily, then at Mark, then back to Emily. And in that moment, he made a decision. "Mark," he said, his voice low and deliberate, "I want you to leave." Mark blinked. "What? Leave?" Dr. Phil repeated. "This conversation isn't for you. It's for her." He pointed at Emily. "She came here to heal. You came here to defend yourself, and I'm not going to let you turn her pain into your redemption story. So go." The audience erupted in applause. Mark stood there, stunned, looking around like someone might intervene. No one did. Finally, he turned and walked out the side door. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and just like that, he was gone. Dr. Phil turned back to Emily. "You okay?" She nodded slowly, wiping her eyes. "Yeah, I think I am." "Good," Dr. Phil said. He sat down across from her again, his tone softening. "Because now we're going to talk about what you need. Not what he did, not what your sister did. What you need." Emily took a shaky breath. "I need to know I'm not crazy. I need to know that what I'm feeling is real." "It is," Dr. Phil said without hesitation. "Everything you're feeling is valid. The anger, the grief, the confusion, all of it. You've been living in a reality that wasn't real, and now you're trying to rebuild from scratch. That's not crazy. That's courage." Emily looked down at the envelope still clutched in her hands. "What if I can't do it? What if I'm not strong enough?" Dr. Phil leaned forward. "You already are. You walked onto this stage. You told your story. You faced the man who hurt you and didn't back down. That's strength, Emily. And your kids, they know it too. That's why they wrote you that letter." She looked at him, tears streaming down her face again, but this time there was something different in her eyes. Hope. Fragile, tentative hope. "Can I read it now?" "Of course," Dr. Phil said. Emily opened the envelope slowly, carefully, like it was something sacred. Inside was a single sheet of paper folded in half. She unfolded it and began to read. The cameras didn't zoom in. The audience didn't make a sound. This moment wasn't for them. It was for her. When she finished, she pressed the letter to her chest and closed her eyes. "They said they love me," she whispered. "They said they're proud of me." Dr. Phil's voice was gentle. "They should be." Off camera, Dr. Phil made a choice no producer expected. He stood up, walked over to the producer in the wings, and spoke quietly but firmly. "I want her to have access to our trauma counselors, full support, no cost, and I want follow-up sessions scheduled before she leaves today." The producer nodded, already making notes. Dr. Phil turned back to the stage, where Emily was still holding the letter, still trying to process everything that had just happened. He didn't sit back down. Instead, he stood beside her chair, one hand on her shoulder. "Emily," he said, "you're not alone in this. I know it feels like you are, but you're not. Your kids are with you, and so am I. We're going to make sure you have the resources you need to rebuild. Therapy, support groups, legal advice if you need it, whatever it takes." She looked up at him, her eyes red and swollen, but clear. "Why are you doing this?" Dr. Phil crouched down again, meeting her gaze. "Because you deserve it. Because your story matters. And because I believe you're going to come out of this stronger than you ever thought possible." The audience stood, one by one, row by row they rose to their feet and they applauded. Not for the drama, not for the spectacle, for her, for Emily, for the woman who had walked onto that stage, broken, and was now slowly beginning to put herself back together. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Weeks later, Dr. Phil sat in his office looking at a photo on his desk. It was a picture of Emily with her 2 children, taken a month after the episode aired. She was smiling, really smiling, the kind of smile that reaches your eyes. Her son had his arm around her. Her daughter was leaning into her side. They looked like a family again. Not the same family they were before, but a family nonetheless. Dr. Phil picked up the photo, studied it for a moment, then set it back down. He thought about that day in the studio. The moment he'd stopped the cameras, the moment he'd handed her that envelope, the moment he'd sent Mark away. He didn't regret any of it, because some stories aren't about resolution. They're about survival. And Emily's story, it was about both. The letter her children had written her was still taped to her bathroom mirror. She read it every morning. It reminded her of three things: that she was loved, that she was strong, and that betrayal, no matter how deep, doesn't get to define the rest of her life. Mark and her sister never reconciled with her. She filed for divorce. She went to therapy. She rebuilt her life piece by piece. And her children, they stood by her every step of the way. Dr. Phil kept the envelope, not the letter, that was Emily's, but the envelope itself. He kept it in a drawer in his desk, a reminder of the day he chose to stop the show and start a healing. Because that's what he does, not just facilitate conversations, but create space for people to find themselves again. That episode became one of the most watched in the show's history, not because of the betrayal, but because of the moment Dr. Phil stopped everything and said, "This is about her." People saw themselves in Emily. They saw their own pain, their own betrayals, their own battles to keep standing when everything falls apart. And they saw hope. Because if Emily could survive this, if she could walk onto that stage, face her worst nightmare, and come out the other side still standing, then maybe they could too. The envelope sits in Dr. Phil's desk to this day, a symbol, a reminder, a promise that when someone is brave enough to speak their truth, there will be someone there to listen, to stop, to care. And sometimes that's all it takes.